Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to HitScan. A lot of you asked about this in the last video, so here is how the pros play Jett. Jett is very much like the Genji of Valorant, the Yasuo, the Wraith, an agent that people really love to play and maybe one of the most popular in unrated or ranked, but incredibly unpopular when you look at the pro competitive scene. And yes, whilst it is early days, there is a pro scene to look at for Valorant. If you just want to find out how to play Jett and how the pros go about it with their playstyles, you can just skip ahead to that part in the video, but I feel before then it's really important to highlight why Jett is so unpopular to begin with. Look across your favourite content creators, streamers and all that jazz who have done a tier list of the agents, and you'll most likely find Jett towards the bottom when it comes to impact and effectiveness in a team environment. This isn't just going to be anecdotal, oh what I feel, what other streamers and content creators feel. There are actual stats to back this up from the tournament scene that highlights just how unpopular and unused Jett actually is. These stats come from another fellow YouTuber, Anderz, who has been tracking the pick rates and win rates of each of the agents played in tournaments, looking at compositions and all that jazz. These stats are a couple of weeks old, but you can see Jett's pick rate is the second lowest both in NA and EU. The only one being used a lot less is Viper, who again is an agent people consider kind of bad. Speaking of which, I would definitely recommend watching Anderz's content. He did a video recently talking about map side bias and also the balance changes that came in a patch recently, how that's affected the scene. Some really interesting insight there that's backed up by the data, so go click it, the video is in the description. And go tell him we said hi too. So a couple of weeks ago, with the stats of Jett being tracked, Jett's pick rate was really low, so why is that? Why is Jett considered to be bad as well? Well, by all accounts, all three of the duelists, Jett, Raze and Phoenix, don't really have outstanding pick rates in comparison to agents like Sage, Cypher and Brimstone. For most it's kind of obvious why, but for those still unaware, it all comes down to available utility and how it can be used to help out your team and not necessarily just you as the player. Duelist's utility kit is naturally selfish. It's all about getting you frags, it's all about making sure that you can have impact as the entry fragger, and it's there to make you excel as an individual. But it doesn't provide as much helpful utility for the rest of your team, certainly in comparison to a Sage or a Cypher, and team play is really important when you get looking into tournament play. The only thing that Jett can really provide her team are the smokes, and those smokes are small, awkward to fire, and also last the shortest amount of times. Compare that to Brimstone smokes, who are a lot easier to use, a lot easier to place, much bigger and last a lot longer. Another negative I suppose as well is that all of her abilities are so incredibly loud, which makes it really difficult to try and surprise the enemy if you're playing aggressively. That part of it is really important with what we're going to go into. But her pick rate is starting to rise. And now this is where we look at the playstyles and how they've been used, and our main focus is going to be the EU team Fish123. Fish have won 5 out of the 6 tournaments that they've played so far, and out of all of the teams, including your Genjis, the T1s, all of the NA regions that were quick to sign up rosters, Fish123 have won the most money in the scene currently. Like I mentioned before, and I know there's going to be a lot of comments, oh there's a pro scene in Valorant, it's early, the game's not even out yet. But at this point, it's fair to say that Fish123 are leagues beyond a lot of individuals with how they use particular heroes. And looking at Jett in particular, we'll be highlighting how Anderz, or Ice Paper Hands, likes to play Jett and how he's able to get away with it. Now the key negative for Jett overall is when it comes to using her dashes and her jumps is that she's not accurate when she uses those abilities in the air and stuff, but also when you dash and then try and fire, there's quite a large gap, which makes it really difficult to dive a character in the same style as say Tracer in Overwatch. Jett can't work that way, it's impossible for her to do so using your abilities to try and jump on an enemy isn't going to work. They'll either hear you very close, or they'll be able to kill you before you can actually fire at them. And that is probably the key thing that I've seen the most out of everybody that's played Jett and done really well for her in the pro scene. They never use their abilities to get into an engagement, they always use it to get out. Here is a really good example actually from Anderz and a position that he loves to play, most certainly with the operator. The gun is important, but we'll go over that really shortly. Instead of using the abilities to get close and to get aggressive, he just holds the W button or the shift button and holds really aggressive, awkward angles that if you were playing any other agent, I would recommend not doing because you don't want to get caught out. But that's a beautiful thing about Jett. She has a lot of get out of jail free cards with how a utility can be used. If she gets pushed on this angle, she can just dash across and she's safe. No other agent can really do that, at least in an instant like Jett can. And if you want to be a little bit more safer, you could smoke this corner and then dash across too. And this is one of the key areas that I see. Jett is played super aggressively, even on defense, by a lot of these Jett players, and then their abilities and their utility is more to get them out of engagements that they might lose a shot on. Here's a really good example of that from Tens actually in the Rivalry Bowl. He jumps around this corner, gets a peek and a nice kill onto somebody holding onto B, but obviously spots that there is somebody on site too. He doesn't want to get traded, so uses the dash to instantly strafe to the left hand side, making it impossible for him to be traded. And this kind of playstyle can be useful regardless of what gun that you're running, but the most impactful way that Jett has been played is in combination with the sniper rifle, the operator. Now, a lot of pro players that have come over from Valorant have got a good amount of experience running with the AWP in Counter-Strike, so it's a really key role for that game if you're looking at the tournament scene there too. The AWP player is typically a role in its own right, and it hasn't necessarily translated all that well recently, at least in Valorant so far, but with Jett it seems to be a nice marriage between using a strong gun and also using a strong agent. And the key why it works so well is taking those engagements and just being really difficult to read. If you've got the operator, you don't want to be staying where Anderz keeps going on A long. If you keep doing that over and over again, you're going to get red, and either the enemy team will avoid going that direction, or they'll punish you by pushing that in a way that you can't really counter. So when you're playing with an operator, you want to be changing up what sites you're playing on. If you're usually on A, you could go B site, you could jump up on the boxes with Jett. You could even push down C long, which is something that Anderz does here. And that is another particular area that Jett is really good at. Because you have the updraft, you can jump onto boxes and make it really difficult and awkward for the enemy team to guess where you're going to be stood. And like I mentioned before, you can play aggressively and disengage with your kit if things get a bit too hairy, so it means that you can keep pushing for intel. Even if Anderz doesn't run into anybody pushing in this direction, he can at least say to his team, there's nobody C, they're probably mid or A. No information is still good information in games like this. But the key thing is making sure that the positioning of the Jett and the operator is constantly being mixed up, making it really difficult for the attacking team to read where the operator is playing from. And this is why Haven's such a popular map for Jett. It's her playground. She loves to be here, hopping up onto boxes on B, standing on the box on C long, being up on Heaven on A. Just a few examples. But I think the best breakdown example that we can get is this match between Fish123 and Start from CS, where this is a best of 3 that's gone 1-all and we're into overtime. And Ice Paper Hands, to an extent, wins him the game. First thing that he does is jump onto these boxes, something that he hasn't actually done from the whole game, and it works out so well. The attacking team place a cyber cage to try and cover them as they move across to sewers. Of course, if you're stood on the ground where Ice Paper Hands usually holds, you can see that his vision is covered, but because he's on these boxes, he has a nice clear angle that he can get a nice easy pick onto Maniac. Now what he does next is really important. He doesn't hold the same spot, because the attacking team can easily come around that corner and kill him if they know where he is. So Ice Paper Hands changes up his positioning, starts looking at sewers, which again is a place that Akuma just isn't expecting, gets punished for it, does the mistake that I kind of mentioned before about peeking the same angle twice, and as you see, Happy is quite happy to punish him for it. By this point, the damage was already done and Ice Paper Hands had done his job, killing 2 and making this attack really awkward. But in the background, there's going to be multiple examples of this, getting a kill with the operator and using Jett's utility to move around graciously, standing on boxes where some other agents just can't reach, and every single time the enemy team just isn't sure where he is, and when you're playing the operator against people that aren't, you can easily punish that. Another great example of this actually came in like the boot camp from a video from Shroud. He's not holding the operator here, and this is very early days into the game's lifespan, but he seems to grasp it very quickly. Every single time he gets a pick into double door, he changes up his positioning into positions that only Jett can really get into, and punishes people one by just constantly switching it up and making it really difficult for the enemy team to read what he's trying to do. If the strength of this playstyle isn't highlighted enough, Eccles, who plays for Fish123, goes into a little bit more detail with an interview from the Mandatory Cup, a cup that they went on to win. Talking about the composition that they run with the Jett, Eccles says, most recently we have allowed Anderz to use Jett on Haven. This allows him to be super aggressive and make all of the plays that he wants, and we know he can win us the game this way and we are confident in his abilities. He goes on to say that I think compositions will always be based around the team game plan, and this could vary a lot for different teams. Jett is a complete solo champ, and we think Haven as the Dust 2 of Valorant. It's heavy individually based, it gives our AWP the maximum amount of maneuverability, which is what we want. So he can take a lot of aggressive peeks, which is something that we've been seeing time and time again. Anderz even told me himself that Jett allows you to do aggressive things and easily get away with it. She has excellent mobility, which helps a lot with an open map such as Haven. Just like I mentioned before, Haven is very much Jett's playground. But does that mean that Jett is only good for Haven? Not really. Anderz goes on to highlight that Jett is solid on bind too, and she can use some excellent aggressive picks. But the problem is that some of the other agents are much stronger than her on this map. If she got buffed more in the future, which is something that the devs are looking to do by the way, she could be more impactful at the moment, but there are just better agents than her. He went on to say though that Jett isn't considered useful on Split, and that he thinks that it's hands down the worst map for her. He doesn't see any benefit to playing Jett on Split that other agents couldn't offer you. But it is worth pointing out that some other teams do run Jett on Split and do have a little bit of impact, so I wouldn't consider her a trash pick here either. But if I was to sum up the playstyle, it's super aggro, like kinda stupid aggro. But they're allowed to do that considering they're using an operator, most of the time at least, but mostly because they have the abilities to get them out of hairy situations and allows them to sort of change up where they're standing. So we've gone over how Jett is played. Can you do this in your own ranked games when ranked is back out again? You can, for sure. I don't think it's necessarily that hard to replicate, but the problem is that it might get your teammates pretty mad at you, and Anderz did mention this when I spoke to him about it. He said that Jett really isn't viable unless your team plays around you and sets you up for picks. If you ever go Jett, you need to be aggressive and utilize her mobility getting out of hairy situations. So he is only allowed to play this way because his team could back him up. If he plays a bit over aggro and gets picked off on his own, that's a big loss. So he's expecting his team to set up utility to help him get out of situations where he might not be able to, or at least if he dies, his teammates can maybe trade him, so his death isn't really that impactful for his side. He is only allowed to play this way because the other 4 members of Fish 123 let him, and they know that they can trust Anderz to do his job, and Anderz can trust his team that they'll look out for him when they can. Obviously, if you're playing solo queue, your teammates might not be looking out for you. And if you're trying to play aggro and you fail, more likely than not your team is going to get very mad at you. There are a few times where Anderz does feed just by playing aggro, but that's part and parcel of playing this agent. And it's not like he's the only person that's doing it. We've seen Tens from C9 do a really good job at using this playstyle too. There are probably more nuances that come out of this, but to be honest, I think those discussions are probably worth leaving a bit longer in Valorant's lifespan when people really start to get good at these agents. It still is early days, but a lot of you guys really wanted me to break down why Jett's popularity is going up and how she's been played in a way that makes her just as good as a good Breach, a good Cypher, a good Brimstone. Jett's earning her keep, and I figured that was worth highlighting. But it's also something super important to me. For those that don't know, I have been casting a lot of Valorant, doing a lot of EU tournaments, including some of the games that you've seen on screen. So doing this analysis and breaking down stuff is really important for stuff I might want to do in the future. So I don't need to plug anything, I guess, but thanks for watching. If you did like this video, then do like it and comment if there's other agents that you'd like me to highlight. Omen's been used a little bit. Would you like me to cover how these players are using him? Or Breach, who's an awkward character. Cypher as well. Let me know what you would like to see on the channel in regards to, I guess, pro analysis, and I'll try and do my best to break that down for you. But thank you very much for watching. Hope you learned a thing or two, and I'll see you next time. Take care.